Hello everyone and welcome to our 11th Open Dev Talk on choosing the best fit for your use case between MQTT, REST API or AWS S3 bucket. Today I will start off to going on our website, highmobility.com. Here, this would be my first recommendation in order for you to make the decision upon which method would work best for your use case. And so if you go to our brand page, you will have the possibility here to consult the different data catalog per brand. And so here you are able to visualize whether the data, which data are available for which brand. And well, you can also consult as a new information in here at which frequency and for the data points you have chosen. So for example, battery level here will be available for pull and for push. So pull correspond to REST API and push correspond to MQTT streaming or AWS S3 bucket. So whenever you want to make up your decision on which method works best, it is best here to rely on the different Airtables and rely on the data availability and which method is available for which data points. There is, for example, speed, the speed data point here, diagnostic get speed, which is available exclusively using push capability, push method. So in this case, you can see that if you build a use case around the speed data point, if you want to collect the speed data, you will have the possibility here to choose MQTT streaming or to have this data point pushed into your S3 bucket. So here already you can make up your mind what works best, and this would be the first recommendation I have for you today. Let's go back to our website, and today I will be using our sandbox environment, which you can access from here. You can sign in or register for free if you don't have you do not have done that yet. And so here I'm accessed my console, and so here today I will not reproduce some of the steps we have already covered. I will be demonstrating now how to pull data using REST API. In order to do so, you can always rely on our guides. And so here you will always find all the steps that I will do on the REST API documentation, on the MQTT documentation as well. And AWS S3 is also here very detailed and explained in the doc. So if I open, for example, the REST API tutorial, today I have already covered some steps, which you can always consult as part of our old OpenDev Talks recordings. For instance, creating a cloud app container, so your own use case. This is something I already have on my side. I have already linked a vehicle using the fleet clearance API, because today I will be focusing more on the fleet B2B type of use case. And that's pretty much the steps that you can always find on our YouTube channel. Here we have we always upload the recording of the old webinars, and so if you want to go through the steps again, I recommend you highly to have a look into the One True Sandbox for Connected Car Data, where our CTO is showing you all of these. Also, today, at last, I will be showing you some use case example or that we already have listed and talked about more in detail in the OpenDev, the 9th OpenDev here. And when it comes to AWS S3 bucket, you can always rely on the latest OpenDev talk our CTO has hosted, and he shows in detail how to set up a bucket, which can take up to a few minutes. And so it's also a very good way to consume data. So that's pretty much it very briefly. So now I will be starting off with a REST API pull. To do so, I'm on the build tab of our platform, which corresponds to a sandbox environment. I have a cloud app container, which corresponds to the first step of the tutorial here. And so in order to do that, I will be using one of the car I have added already. This one. So this is my virtual car. This is the simulator. And here you can find here the VIN, so the unique identifier of this virtual vehicle. You can also find the VIN here. And so this is also an item which we are working with and which I will be using today. And so today I have set as a scene, for example, I think my car is, yes, a Peugeot Citroën. So it's a Stellantis vehicle in this case for today. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So in order to do a REST API a pull request, today I'm using some sample codes that you are able to find on our GitHub. This will facilitate hopefully your testing too. So I have, you can go into REST Auto API examples, and this is pretty much the sample code that you can execute that will initiate the pull request. Here, you have two things to consider in here in order to use the sample code is first the REST API config itself. So this snippet, you can find it directly in your app container. In order to find the REST API snippet, you can go under Client Certificate tab, and here you have the full snippet that you can directly copy. So that's pretty much straightforward. And second item to consider here, also is the app URI. Here it's a productive type of URI, so we will change it because we are on our sandbox. And last but not least, in order to retrieve data from your virtual car, you will need to get the access token of your virtual car. In order for the code to work, you will be able then to paste your valid access token in a payload as the subject. So this is pretty much here the idea. And this sample code is meant for you to already retrieve and use the endpoint which correspond to vehicle status. And vehicle status will enable you to get the whole data that you have selected and the whole data that your car has been cleared through fleet clearance as well. So this is pretty much very, very briefly what I've been doing on my side as well. So I have this sample code on my side. I have put my REST API config. As you can see here, you have already all the information. So I'm also in the sandbox environment. So no worries, you are only retrieving virtual data from a virtual car. So this is not real car data. It's just for testing purposes. So this is pretty much the guarantee that you are not retrieving data from that we are GDPR compliant in this case as well. Here, I have here the sub, which in there I will be able to paste my access token. And this is the idea is that if you want to go for pull and REST API, you will need to retrieve the access token itself. For that, I'm using an endpoint which is here. This is the post endpoint. I'm in the sandbox environment. This is the access token one, as you can see. And in order to use this endpoint, I will need an auth token to be generated, a GVT auth token. So if you follow the instructions, you will see that it's also mentioned. And so in order to do that, I already covered that step. You can always rely on as well a sample code that we put available, which is to be found in our service account API examples here as well. So this will enable you to create and generate auth token. So you can see that REST API and pull has some steps to be covered first in order to be able to pull the data. So I have prepared all of this. I have put my service account API key in here already in my sample code. So if I go back to the auth token one, here this is pretty much the idea. You need to put in your private key and API key, and these two you can generate those here. In a service account key tab. So this is where you can generate this set of credentials and put it in the auth token sample code as well. So here, if I execute the auth token first, because I will need a fresh one, for that I will use my terminal. So I'm using a Mac on my side. And so here, as you can see, I have a valid GVT auth token. And as of now, I'm able to use all the available endpoints as part of our service account API. And here, for instance, the access token one, which enable me to get the access token of my virtual car. So here I will doing this. I have replaced it. I have the VIN of my virtual car, which correspond to here. And that's pretty much it. I can already execute the curl here directly in my terminal. So on my side, this is pretty much what I do. I will execute it. And I use the GQ just to make it a bit more presentable, a bit more beautiful. And so here I have a valid access token. I have which expires in an hour. I have a refresh token, which enable me to get a fresh access token to renew it whenever the access token has expired. And something important as well, you have the scope, which indicates you which data points I'm able to pull, which data points have I cleared when I added my simulator. So this is also important. So you're making sure that you know what you can retrieve, etc. So here you can see that I have covered many steps already in order to pull data. So now I have my valid access token. I can finally have a complete sample code with which I am able now to retrieve data. Do not forget to save it on your side as well. And now I will execute the REST API code and pull data from a virtual car. So now I'm getting there. And yeah, that's pretty much what you can expect to get. So I'm retrieving now data from my virtual car. These are the data which were part of the scope, which was described in it. And you can see something here appearing as a log. You can see that you have a confirmation that data have been pulled, and you can even see here in detail pretty much what has been pulled exactly. So you can even see the response you have successfully got on your side, etc. The battery level, for example, here, etc., etc. So this is also something you can always monitor when pulling the data. And so here, what I will do, I will change a value of my virtual car, and I will then pull data again. So you can expect here, in this case, for pull for REST API, to get the data pulled whenever you have created your own logic. So if you want to pull data once a day, if you want to pull data once a week, or just by the end of the month, this is pretty much when you will expect to get the latest and fresher data. And so here, if I pull again, I will have it again here notified, and I will be able to see, let me find it, the odometer value, which I just set to 25,000. And something also important, it's always the timestamp. So the timestamp will always indicate you how fresh the data are. And this in UTC 0. So as you can see, it's 3 o'clock 13, and I've changed the data at 5 o'clock 13. So this is, as you can see, how you can proceed with pull and with the REST API. An alternative for pull and REST API, a good alternative actually, is to use Postman. And so for that purpose, you can find again on our GitHub some useful documents. And so if you go to Postman collection on our GitHub, or if you search for it, you will find different collection or the environment as well. This file, you can directly download them from here, from our GitHub. And whenever you have done this, you can import them. So using here the import function. So now let's have a look into how you can use Postman for REST API. And so this is pretty much what I've been doing. I've imported the fleet collection. I have imported the other collection with all the endpoints you can use to retrieve data. The sample code I've been using previously is the vehicle status endpoint, but here you can see we have many different ones. You can also put to a test. You can retrieve directly. Maybe if you want to just pull a certain type of data, you can get, for example, the vehicle location. You can get all the data which are part of the diagnostic category, etc., etc. So here you can be a bit more specific, but you can also test it pretty much quickly. So first thing first, if you import, is to import the environment. And so here I will show you how to set it up briefly. And so the environment you will need to put in the current value tab pretty much all the credentials you will find in your app container. So first, you can recognize the REST API config itself. So this is the snippet I also mentioned previously. So this, you will find it in your app container. Let me go back to it. Yes. So the REST API snippet, again, you will find it under client certificate and REST. This is pretty much the same idea here. Then you will need to specify the client ID and client secret in this case. In those two, you can find them under OAuth client, so client ID and client secret. You can copy them directly from here. So that's pretty much it for now. And you need to specify the token URI. So this is pretty much what I've just used in order to retrieve the access token. And this is what Postman will also be able to do for you. So if I go back to my code, as you can see, I use the endpoint access token. So this is pretty much the same. So this is what you need to specify here. As a redirect URI, it's not too important. I just put a dummy one, but you can just specify something. It's not that important, but yeah, this is pretty much what I put as a test. You can put your own redirect URI. Then as a base URL, this is pretty much the following: sandbox dot, because I'm working on the sandbox /v5. This corresponds to here. So if I go back to my REST API code, this is pretty much here, the URI, which is mentioned in here, as you can see. So it is also mentioned in the REST API snippet. So this is pretty much that. Then that part, the access token part, service account, no, the access token part, you don't need to specify it. Then here you will need to put the service account API key itself. So if I just uncover it, this is pretty much what I used in order to generate host token GVT. And so this is pretty much what you can generate under the tab service account keys in here. And so if I hit plus, you will have a JSON file, which include both of these, the full service account API key. And this is pretty much the idea. You can simply copy all of this and paste it directly in it as it is. So it's quite easy. So you can put it in here. The API base URL in this case is sandbox.api.highmobility.com, and the rest can be left empty. So this is pretty much the idea. This is very, very brief how to configure Postman for REST API pool for a fleet type of use case. And so do not forget to save your environment accordingly. And now the first thing you will always need to do is to initiate the access token itself endpoint. So this one, so you will need to send the access token request. So in order to do that, you will need to go to the body itself to specify your VIN as a parameter. So this is pretty much what it's actually analog to what I've been doing here. As you can see, as a parameter, I had my virtual VIN, and I have also a valid GVT, but that part, the Postman will take care of it for you. And so now if I choose the right environment in this case, so make sure that you have also the right environment chosen in here. And if I hit send, you can see that I got fresh access token, refresh token here, for example, F9F. And so if I go back to my environment, you can see that here the environment has taken into consideration the fresh credentials. And so starting from now, you are able to use and retrieve data using the full collection we also put available for you. And so here I will again initiate a vehicle status endpoint. And so you can see here, you have the possibility to get the whole data. I have, where is my odometer, 25,000. As you can see, this is pretty much the same idea. And so if I go back to the car simulator, let's put another value. Now I'm able to retrieve data using my terminal, but also using Postman. So if I hit send again, this time I will get my fresher odometer value, as you can see. And I also have here another notification that I've pulled data, this time using Postman. So as you can see, this is the idea with REST API and pool. Now I will go over to MQTT. I will not go too deep in detail with the mosquito sub part. This is also a part where our CTO has described how to set up your mosquito sub. I will simply execute it in my terminal. So this is one way to subscribe to MQTT and receive push data over to your feed. And so here, this is pretty much the idea. I have input the MQTT certificates, and these certificates you are able to generate on the data streaming tab. So here I chose MQTT, I hit plus, and this is where you will have a zip file including all of the PEM certificates in order to subscribe to MQTT. And so here, this is pretty much what I did. I specified those, all of those. Here and this is the idea is that you can test your MQTT, the MQTT streaming protocol on the sandbox. So here I'm sandbox dot, broker is always 8883, QoS is 1. Here it's also sandbox slash, so you're also able here to stream data, virtual data. Here, this is the app ID. So this is the unique identifier of your app container you can find here. And that's pretty much it. So if I execute this in my calendar, in my, in my terminal, I'm already here subscribed to MQTT. And now if I do another update, we'll put again something recognizable. Let's put 888 in here. And so here the data will be pushed. As you can see this time, this will be pushed, and it has been pushed already, but you can always pull the data and also choose to stream the data. So pull and push are both, you can both combine and use both of these methods at the parallel. And as you can see here in my feed, I have received the new updated kilometer value. It's also, the timestamp is also here to be found. So you can see that I have updated like a few seconds ago, etc., etc. So here you can see there are two way different methods to get data. And in order to have the data being pushed over to my feed, I pretty much only need to connect to the MQTT broker. And that's the only effort I needed to do in the end. So as a recap, when I was using REST API in Pool, I had to use an auth token. I had to generate a JVT auth token. I had to retrieve the access token, even using Postman. And then I was able to pull data until the access token expire in an hour. On the contrary, MQTT is rather straightforward. I'm able to get all the push updates over to my feed, and that's pretty much the huge here difference. So if I unsubscribe to my MQTT, now I wanted today to also show you another way, another alternative for MQTT, which is also convenient. As you can see, we have been using so far the terminal and Mac. And so I have been choosing to show you today MQTT-X. MQTT-X is a solution, also an MQTT solution broker that you can install on Mac, but as well on Windows. So it will be also convenient for Windows user to give it a go. And so today I wanted to show you how to configure it step by step. It's rather easy, and again, you don't need to authentic to generate any JVT, you don't need to use any endpoint or get the access token. As soon as your vehicle is cleared and added through free clearance, you will be able to get the push data directly over to your feed. And so here, this is pretty much also the idea. Instead of me executing anything on the terminal, which might be not convenient for you, and because also you need to install the Mosquito sub module, etc. So I think MQTT-X is a good option for you today. So in order to create a new connection, you can hit the plus button. And so here, let's name it Open Dev Talk. 11, I already did it here. And so here as a client ID, this corresponds, the client ID for MQTT correspond to this one. So whenever you have generated MQTT certificates, PEM certificates, you will always find your client ID in here. And so on my side, this is also pretty much the same here. This is the client ID in here, which is also repeating on the file name and also here. So I will be using mine, which is that one. And so if you generate as well the file, you can find it in here, or you can find it in the certificate name. So this is the client ID. As a host, you need to choose MQTT-S. Here you need to specify mqtt.highmobility.com. You can refer to the video anytime. The port is similar to what I've been using for Mosquito Sub. It's always 8883. And here you need to choose SSL TLS to enable SSL TLS as true. To choose the certificate self-signed, and this is pretty much here the part where you can upload your file. Let me put it a bit bigger. Yes. So the first file that you need to choose. So on my side, I've been downloading them directly in my download folder. And so you need to choose as first the CA underscore certificates PAM certificate. So this is the first one. Then you have the client certificate file as a second file to be uploaded here. And then you have the private key itself. So these are all the three that you need to upload and choose wherever you have downloaded them. At last, and then we will be finished already with the connection, is to choose here. You can pretty much, if you want to do something specific here, you can. But for today, I will simply just recommend you to choose MQTT version 5.0 and the QoS 1 in this case, and that's pretty much it. So this, we are already done. So if I hit connect, I will receive as a confirmation that it is connected. And so here I'm connected to the MQTT broker using all my credentials. So as you can see, it takes a couple of minutes to set it up. Then I will subscribe to a certain topic. In this case, I have it already on my side. But for that, I will advise you to always have a look into the MQTT documentation, and so you are able to refer to that. For the topic itself, as you can see, it's sandbox slash, and here this is the app ID, which correspond to the identifier of my app container. And here I have /hashtag, which enable me to get all the updates. So I will subscribe to it. I will take it here as a reference, but you can always have a look into the documentation. Here, this is QoS1. You can specify a certain color. Let's put a nice pink, and I confirm. So that's already done. I'm done with my MQTT-X configuration. And now let's push some data. So now again, I will put a specific value. I will put 200,000. For example, I want to be notified, or I want to track the odometer of my vehicle. And so if you do so, you are able to always pull the data. So that's for sure. Just wanted to make sure that you have. So here I have pulled the data, but here the data will also come in. So as you can see, I need to, or you can create for pull a logic where the data is being pulled, or as you can see, I needed to do it manually to get the latest update in here. So 200,000, but for push, I don't need to do much more. Maybe it's a bit better to put it as a JSON. With MQTT-X, you are able to export the data you have received as a JSON file, which is also convenient. And so here you can pretty much simulate, let's say, the odometer, which is increasing, etc. We can change the location of the car. Maybe the car is now in, let's say, in Paris. Let's put Paris, for example, here. So the vehicle locations have changed and now has been again pushed. And so you can expect this data to be flowing already in here. So as you can see, we have received the odometer 200,001, 200,002, and the vehicle location will also come here. As you can see, I didn't need to do much more, just waiting for the data to flow. So that's pretty much quite convenient. As you can see, MQTT is convenient for dynamic updates, and pull is convenient if you just want data at a specific moment of the day, or once a week, or once a month. So this is the idea of both of these methods. at last, I want today to mention AWS S3 buckets. So you have the possibility to choose the push method you prefer to have for your use case. So here I've showcased you MQTT for S3 bucket. I invite you to have a look into the last OpenDev talk. And so you can always refer to the S3 documentation. And so for S3 buckets, in this case, the data will be pushed over to you every 5 minutes, if I'm not exactly, every 5 minutes, or if the file contains a maximum of 1000 messages, a file will be created into your S3 bucket itself. And so this is pretty much the idea, is that MQTT will offer a very dynamic approach, whereas AWS S3 bucket, you will have the possibility to get a large amount of data being also pushed over to you, so you're not missing any update. For both push capability method, you will always have 24 hours retention. And so if for any reason your MQTT connection is broke, or if you are performing any maintenance, then you can you are ensured to not have any data loss in this case. And so both options, AWS S3 bucket or MQTT, is ensuring that you always have the data being pushed over to you. When it comes to pull, as you have seen, you will have always the freshest data whenever you choose to pull the data. And so this is the idea of all three. And now let's go back to my presentation. And so I've been showing you a bit how it looks like, how is the process. So to recap, pull corresponds to REST API, and so you can choose to pull the data once per minute, every hour. Actually, you can even use a functionality on Postman, which pull the data for you at a specific moment, so you are always able to set up your logic. For MQTT, you will always get the latest and constant updates pushed over to your feed. And for AWS S3, the configuration, and as you can see for both MQTT and S3, the configuration do not take too much effort, especially for AWS S3. It's a no-code approach to set up your bucket, and so this is pretty much the idea. The advantage of AWS S3 is that you can always connect to any of your AWS services, platform, big data solutions, which can connect to S3 directly, or BI, any BI tool that AWS offers, etc. So the idea is that you can pretty much perform any analysis based on the large volume of data. And so that's pretty much the idea. With MQTT, you can imagine that the feed or the data flowing and being showed on your platform, and have the freshest and latest update from your vehicle, maybe for vehicle location, etc. So you can always choose the preferred way. And so you can always combine pull with any of the push method. So that's also the idea. So last time, last OpenDev talk, we have also introduced some use cases which can be applicable with connected car data. One of them is quite rather common and including only one data point, which is the odometer, the mileage. And so in this case, I would recommend always to go for both REST API and MQTT streaming. It depends on how much data you want to collect, how much data you want to store. So this is pretty much up to you. We have seen for pay-as-you-drive, for example, or car subscription type of model, that the data is not needed on a very dynamic way, so that therefore you can go for a REST API and pull approach, and you can pull data from your fleet every week, for example, or you can pull data once a month by the end of the month in order to build your own customer, etc. In order maybe to evaluate the carpool utilization, in this case, it makes sense more to have the odometer being tracked and pushed over to you on a dynamic way. And so this is pretty much the idea. If you just want to check whether the mileage value is correct, it's also possible to simply pull the data at a specific moment whenever you just want to make sure that there is no mileage fraud, etc. So you can see that but you can always combine both. You can have both used as a complementary option. And I would also highly recommend to also always be able to stream the data and have your credentials set in your Postman, for example, so you can always pull the data if you want to make sure a lookup for the mileage odometer in this case. We also mentioned, and the EV, an electrical vehicle, becomes more and more popular. And so in this case, it is actually way more interesting to get the battery level, for example, or any EV for the EV route optimization type of use case, which include the vehicle location. It is, in this case, way better. And you have seen previously on the Airtable for Stellantis, these data points are actually available for push, and so it makes sense for you to have all of these updates push over to you, and so you are able to track charging process, for example, or to make sure that you can display over to your customer, your platform, your app, what is the estimated range for the vehicle, etc. When it comes to live route updates and optimization, EV route optimization, obviously MQTT streaming is the recommended choice in this case. When it comes to location monitoring and trips, you can imagine, and it's quite obvious that MQTT will be the best way. Also, especially for stolen vehicle type of use case or tracking or prevention, it's best obviously to get the latest update always from your vehicle, and so the geolocalization will be generated from the vehicle and pushed over to your feed, and so you're always able to get the latest and fresher updates from the vehicle location. And so this is pretty much a strong advice in this case. And also if you want to introduce the geofencing feature, etc. So in this case, we highly recommend for you to test MQTT using our sandbox, to set up your own MQTT client first in a sandbox and test it. And so you can anticipate the integration already before going into production. And so you can pretty much offer this type of service to your customer and get always the freshest data. When it comes to route history as well, it makes sense to have everything, all the updates at the frequency that a car can push data to get everything and collect everything on your side. So this is why we strongly recommend here MQTT and streaming. One use case that becomes more and more popular, and for that purpose, you can imagine that a large volume of cars can be involved, etc. And for this part, it's important it was important for us to introduce a new way of consuming data, which is AWS S3 bucket. So in this case, I will also recommend to go for this type of approach, especially if you want to do some kind of predictive maintenance approach, if you want to build a full analysis on a larger set of data or a volume of cars. So AWS is actually quite attractive for that purpose, because you have, as mentioned previously, some tools that can be connected directly to your S3 bucket on which you can perform analysis, etc. And so this is why it's best to go for AWS in this case. For push, you can choose one or the other, and in this case, you can always go for MQTT if you prefer, especially if you want whenever warning lights is on the car and you want to initiate any process on your side, then obviously in this case it's better to get the data over to MQTT, so you have a more dynamic approach. You will have a higher frequency of data being delivered over to you rather in comparison to S3 bucket, and so it's better for you to go for, yes, in this case, MQTT. If, for example, the tire pressure is reaching a certain level and you want to have a fully automated process initiated on your side, then we strongly advise you to directly go for MQTT. If you just want to assess a large volume of data and maybe evaluate a fleet, maybe the health of the fleet, or come up with some a predictive model, then you can go for AWS S3 bucket in this case. So that's pretty much it for today. I hope this will help you make the right decision upon which data method works best for you. As you can see, MQTT and S3 buckets are both options which do not require big effort to test with or to integrate. When it comes to pool data, this could be preferred for you if you don't want to have large amount of data coming over to you, or if you just want a specific data at a specific moment of your process. And so, yes, I hope this was helpful for you today.